All right, so let's begin our today's session. So today's session is geared towards a specific topic, which is in the news, which has been in the news recently. Okay, uh, so let's talk about that topic, and that topic is ransomware. Okay, so just let me know if you can hear me properly, if my voice is properly audible. I hope my voice is audible. Okay, so I want to talk about ransomware today. Okay. And can you give me any information related to ransomware? Yes, Prabhakaran. Can you give me any information related to ransomware? Could you write down something about ransomware in the chat box just so that I know what you already know about? Okay, so you can take your time and let me know what you think about ransomware. Have you ever dealt with ransomware directly or indirectly, or is it something you have just heard about in the news as well as on different websites? Okay, so I want to talk about ransomware today because in 2020 and 2021, we have seen basically a surge in these attacks. Okay, so these attacks have been there since late 1980s, but due to what was offered by the pandemic last year, ransomware authors, they got a bigger attack surface to exploit, and that is why it is such a big threat these days. It's a simple, it works. It's the working of ransomware is not that complex. Okay, what it does, it sends out maybe a phishing email or maybe something that a user gets urged to download, and then upon clicking that link or downloading maybe thing as simple as a software crack, it will do what? It will encrypt the user's system, and then it will only decrypt it if the victim pays a ransom. However, there are a lot of cases where we have observed that even after successful payment of ransom, the devices still are locked. Okay, so that's something else, and we can take that topic for some other time. Okay, that's due to the ethics followed by ransomware authors. But then, yeah, like I said, that's a different topic. So, like I said, ransomware is not a new type of a threat. Ransomware goes back to 1980s. Okay, so the first ransomware attack was named as AIDS Trojan, and we actually don't have floppy disks anymore. But at that time, floppy disk seemed like the best way to propagate ransomware. Okay, so basically, it contained a program, and what it did, it basically kept a count of how many times the computer system was started, and as soon as the count reached a certain number, all the files would be encrypted. Now, just to let you know, this ransomware was not released so as to make money. It was just there to make people aware about ransomware. Okay, and at that time people did not think much, and they did not have notion of security. So that is why it was just an informational ransomware attack, just to let people know that, hey, this is what can happen if you do not pay attention. If you just keep on clicking on random links, this is what will happen to your computer. Okay. What about you, Mohammed? Have you ever dealt with ransomware directly or indirectly? So do you work in SOC or are you a network engineer? Like, where have you heard of ransomware? Just in the news, or do you have any experience with ransomware? Okay. So, like I said, in the early days, ransomware authors just wanted the victims to know how capable they were in their coding skills. But then, like I said, everything once, gets attention, then people start commercializing it, right? And that is why in the early 2000s, cyber criminals got to know that, hey, this is one way through which we can make money. And that is how they started exploiting users and started charging them money for decryption of ransomware strands. Okay. So, Mohammed, so did you fix it, or could you tell me about the story that you were involved in? A little bit. You don't have to lay out all the details, but you can just let me know like what happened. Was it there on just one machine, or did it infect the whole network? Can you write it down? I'll just talk about ransomware evolution and trends as well. So when we talk about ransomware, okay, yeah, I'll just unmute you. Yeah, sure. You can go ahead now and unmute yourself.
Hello.
Yeah, hi, Mohammed. Can you hear
I
me?
have in a area.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm unable to hear you properly. Your voice is cracking in between. Could you try now?
So basically, I have experienced many times, and one of the time it ransomware was there was attack on a ransomware in a client server, and about all the PCs that have unupdated Windows
Okay.
were targeted for this year in this ransomware.
Okay. So were the Windows systems running on Windows 7? Was that
Uh,
WannaCry ransomware attack?
no, one time it was yes, one time it was Windows 7, and one time it was Windows Server 2012 with uninstalled.
Okay, okay, cool.
So
Yeah,
I
that
have
that
experienced two
is
times.
okay, okay. Yeah. I know the experience wouldn't be so good because at that time you're working 24/7 to resolve that issue. But then I'll talk about a similar experience and how we can look at different knowledge bases just to understand how systems are patched and how one specific vulnerability targets different types of Windows operating systems as well, ranging from Windows 7 to Windows 8 to even Windows Server 2012. Okay, so I'll open the official Microsoft knowledge base page for you, just so that you can take a look at it and you can understand how it works. Okay, cool. Thanks for sharing your experience. Okay, so I just want to talk about ransomware evolution and trends as well. So this is a chart that I created myself. Okay, so in 1989, we saw the first ransomware ever, and basically it was released just to spread awareness among people. Okay, its name was AIDS Trojan, and at that time, HIV and AIDS was at peak, and that is why what they want. This is what they wanted to do, just to educate people about the actual disease as well as this computer disease. Okay, and then in 2004, we saw the first commercialized ransomware. By commercialized, I mean that cyber criminals were trying to exploit users, okay, and they were only willing to decrypt systems if users paid ransom. And at that time, uh, cryptography has been there since 1970s, but when they offered to decrypt their systems, they did not make use of cryptographic keys, okay, or they did not make use of Bitcoin because Bitcoin was not there at that time in 2004, right? So they used to send emails to the victims, and they told the victims to send money at this particular PO address. Okay, so that is what used to happen in early 2000s. And then we saw a gradual increase in these attacks, GP code followed by Riveton, CryptoLocker. CryptoLocker has been a very infamous ransomware uh, in the cyberspace. And then in 2014, we saw the first Android ransomware. Okay, it was known as Cypeng, and it basically spread via email attachments. After I go through the slide, we'll figure out like the main methods through which ransomware spreads. Okay, and if a user is cyber aware, or if a user follows good cyber hygiene, then we can prevent such kind of attacks. Okay, and then in 2015 we saw the first Linux ransomware. People thought that it wasn't possible at all, but it was not due to an inherent fault in Linux. It was basically due to a fault in a CMS. Okay, a content management system. It's a very popular content management system. It's known as Magento. It's there for easing out the responsibilities of an administrator. So at that time, encoder ransomware basically used this CMS to go inside Linux systems. Okay, and then in 2016, Key Ranger, I have jotted down all the major ransomware attacks till 2020, but in 2021 we have also seen a lot of other ransomware attacks, like one on the Colonial Pipeline. Okay, so if we try to summarize what actually happened in these ransomware attacks and how these attacks spread. So these attacks spread majorly because of the human errors or human faults. Like if you get a random floppy disk, well, you don't work with floppy disks these days. You work with USB drives. So if you plug in a random USB drive which you have no idea about in your own system, what is bound to happen? Obviously, an attack. Okay, let's say the ransomware is benign. But what does that indicate about a user? It means that a user is not cyber aware. It's similar to, needles lying on the road. If I just take a needle and inject it on myself, what is going to happen? It's going to be a 50-50 probability, right? I might catch something from that needle, I might not. Okay. So all these attacks majorly happen because of our own faults. Okay. If we look at other ways of how these attacks are spread, then you can figure out that some people clicked on maybe email attachments that they thought were from legitimate people. Okay, or let's say if your organization is not uh, uh, enforcing email security, if the DKIM records, if the SPF records are missing, then obviously phishing emails are bound to happen. Okay, and they are going to infect not only just one computer, they're going to infect the whole network as well. Okay, so from the previous slide, when we looked at the different attacks and the trends, this is something that came out of that diagram, the ransomware sources actually. Okay, so these days, one of the most common ways through which ransomware spreads is via email attachments. That is why in almost every organization, whether a person is from IT or is from finance department or from any other department, they are made to go through some cyber security awareness trainings. And at the end, they are made to go through a test. Okay, they don't know that it's a test. It's basically an email that comes from somewhere. Okay, and they just want to find out if the user is cyber aware or not. Okay, so if I write down a very fancy email telling you that, hey, you won an iPhone, and you just click on this link to claim it, then what is going to happen? You're going to fall for that scam. And if you click on a link, eventually you're going to get a ransomware on your machine. Okay. Removable media. Removable media these days is not a very common factor of spreading ransomware. But if you go back to, early, uh, I wouldn't say early, if you go back to 2014 or 2015, there was a very famous attack that happened in Iran. The name of the attack was Stuxnet. Okay, so they had their centrifugal plant, and somebody maybe in their office or maybe an insider plugged in a random USB drive, and that led to the complete shutdown of the centrifuges, and Iran basically went through a lot of losses at that time. Okay. And then you have other methods as well, like malvertising, social media, and SMS. And then if you use dark web, dark web has come up as a very interesting part of the web, where you can share information anonymously. Nobody is going to find out who you are. You can even become a whistleblower and reveal truth about different governments or different people who are not doing so well. But ransomware as a service is a new market that has come up on the dark web, where you can just purchase ransomware from any ransomware author. And what you would have to do is you would have to pay, or you would have to share some of your profit with the ransomware author. Okay, so this is how dark web has evolved as place for sharing or selling ransomware. Earlier, it was heaven for people who wanted to sell drugs. Now, once the FBI and the other law enforcement agencies put a stop on that, now cyber criminals are trying to sell ransomware. Okay, and it's basically a decentralized marketplace where it becomes very hard to find out the source. So the law enforcement agencies are having a very hard time finding out who is running such marketplaces. Even if they put an halt, even if they put a halt to the marketplace, the domain itself, then obviously a new domain is going to come up and the selling is going to persist. Okay. Now, talking about ransomware, there are majorly two main types of ransomware. Okay, one is crypto and the other one is locker. Okay, so to make it understand, I'll just take the help of a blackboard. So basically, we've got two types of ransomware. Talking about the first one, crypto ransomware has its roots in cryptography. And as we know, there are two types of cryptographic algorithms: symmetric and asymmetric. Okay, so for this, I'll just refresh the basics of cryptography as well. So what happens in cryptography? You've got a message M, okay, and you want to send it over a medium to someone who you know. Okay, but then one thing which you are not sure of is the medium through which this message is going to go over. Okay, so for that, what are you going to do? You are going to take this message, you are going to apply a cryptographic algorithm, and when it goes through the medium, it will go in an encrypted format. Encrypted format. And when it finally reaches the intended recipient, they will apply the decryption technique on it and they will be able to read the message. Okay, so taking a very simple example, there is a website called crypty.com. Okay, I'll take you to that website. So if I take the world's first cryptographic cipher, which is Caesar cipher, so this is how it works. Let's suppose this is the message that I want to craft and I want to send it to you, Mohammed, right? And when it travels over an unsecure medium, what will I do? I'll apply a cryptographic algorithm, and along that algorithm, I will apply a key. Okay. Now, on the basis of that key and that algorithm that I've applied, I will get something like this. So anyone who is trying to sniff the medium or trying to read whatever is happening over that insecure channel will get to see my message like this. Okay. On the other hand, when you as a recipient receive this message, so on your end, decryption will be applied. Okay. And you will be able to read the message like this, the original message, how it was. Okay. Now, this was a very simple example of symmetric key cryptography, right? So in symmetric key cryptography, we have just one key. Okay. Obviously, management is easy because you're dealing with just one key. But then there are some security issues as well, which arise because of this one key. And can you tell me what are those issues? Yes. Could you tell me what are those issues? Could you write that down in the chat box? What could be the issues that could arise due to just one key? Yeah. So if the key gets leaked, then even if it gets from leaked from one end, which means your whole security is compromised, right? The security is compromised. So that concept applies to ransomware as well. Why? Because let's say if we are dealing with a crypto ransomware which uses just one key, then let's assume that the ransomware author chose to give the victim that key. And because it was just one key, now if a similar attack happens somewhere else, then this victim who now has this symmetric key can share this symmetric key on a forum where other people can make use of this key and can decrypt the ransomware. And believe me, in the earlier stages of ransomware, in the earlier phases of ransomware attacks, a lot of ransomware authors still relied on symmetric keys because at that time, not a lot of people were aware about these techniques. And still in this era, we don't see a lot of people who know about symmetric key cryptography and asymmetric key cryptography. It's either going to be the developers or the network security professionals who know about such terms. Okay. So then after seeing that their attacks are all these attacks are going to wane and they are not making any money out of it, that is when they decided to launch crypto ransomware attacks using asymmetric key cryptography. So I'll just write asymmetric key cryptography, AKC. And as you know, asymmetric key cryptographic algorithms are very, very strong. Why? Because they make use of prime numbers and not just small prime numbers like 13 or 17. They make use of at least 3-digit or 4-digit prime key, uh, uh, prime key numbers. Okay. And that is why these attacks are very, very strong. Okay. So it's just impossible to decrypt this attack by yourself. That is why, unless and until you get the private key from the ransomware author themselves, you won't be able to do anything at all. There are a lot of brute forcing tools these days, right? There are a lot of brute forcing tools like John the Ripper, Hydra, Hashcat, but they can't work in this manner. Okay. Because when you create a private key, or let's say when you create a key pair, it's completely up to you how many bits of keys do you want to generate. So more the number of bits, it's going to become impossible for a person to decrypt it. Am I right? Is that clear? Or do you have any doubt? Okay. So this is cryptographic. This is crypto ransomware. That's the first type of ransomware, and this is more prevalent. Okay. Now, in the other case, you also get locker ransomware as well, where it does not encrypt the registry. Okay, it just prevents you from accessing the device. Okay, so this is something that won't encrypt your files and folders. It will just stop you from accessing the device itself. Okay. Now, what can happen in this case? If you know that your device has been infected by locker ransomware, then what is an option here? You can move the storage device to the other computer. Okay, this is how you can prevent yourself from getting hit by locker ransomware. Okay, now I'll just proceed with the next slide where I want to talk about the typical stages of ransomware. Okay, so summing up all the previous slides, this is how a ransomware will work. Now you take any source at all, whether it's email attachments or removable media or via malvertising. So malvertising is basically something that if you go to a legit website like bbc.com or AOL.com, uh, on maybe the left side of the or the right side of the website where you have small boxes, you will see some ads. Okay, and you'll think that since you're on bbc.com or aol.com and these are trusted websites, then if you go to these links, nothing is going to happen. Okay, so attackers have found new ways to compromise these websites as well. Okay, and these are known as malicious advertisements. Okay, hence the name attached to this is malvertising, malicious way of advertising. And if you click on these links, and if you haven't been using your browser securely, because what a browser does is any JS file that it gets, any JavaScript file that it gets, it's going to render it, okay, as quickly as it gets it. And that is going to eventually lead to a ransomware attack. So obviously not a complete ransomware attack. It needs to
Hi, you are watching the recording from one of our live session. Hit like, share, and subscribe for more future updates.
be the first stage, that is the infection. Okay. And then depending on what type of ransomware attack it is, if it's a crypto ransomware, then it's going to lock your registry and the common files and folders. Or if it's a Docker ransomware, then it's just going to lock the user interface. And then it will demand ransom from you. And then it's completely up to you what you want to do. If you want to call the law enforcement, or if you want to, pay this ransom and wait for the ransomware author to give you the key. Okay. Just one thing that I want to show you now, you would have heard that, to protect yourself from different type of cyber attacks or to make yourself anonymous, you should use a browser called Tor. Okay, a lot of people know about its capabilities related to anonymity. Okay, but one thing that they don't know is how secure it is. Why? I'm not going to talk about the relay methods that you build a circuit and you've got three nodes through which your data passes through and it makes you completely anonymous. Okay, I'm not going to compare it to a VPN. I just want to take you to a method followed by Tor. Okay, so basically when you go to its security settings, it has three methods. So let's go to Tor network settings. Okay, and let's go to privacy and security. And as we scroll down, we see the three security levels present here. So you've got standard, you've got safer, and you've got safest. Okay. So any website that is non-HTTPS, because non-HTTPS website or an HTTP website is more prone to vulnerabilities and can be exploited easily. So that is why in the safer mode of Tor, what can happen is JavaScript is going to be disabled on non-HTTPS websites. Okay. And then if you've got fonts and math symbols, which can also lead to, which can mean different encoded terms or base64 terms, that is also disabled in this mode. In the safest mode, irrespective of which website it is, even if it's a trusted website, JavaScript is going to be disabled because JavaScript is considered to be a culprit when you talk about ransomware attacks coming from malvertising. Is that clear? I hope you got it and there is no difficulty in this point. Okay. So obviously, do not always consider using Tor because you want to be anonymous. Okay. Consider using Tor because of its features. Okay. And obviously, as you try to use these features one by one, you're going to find out that in this mode, which is the safest mode, the ease of access will be at a minimal level. Okay, because ease of access, which is performance, and security, not always go hand in hand. Okay, so in some of the cases you can consider them being inversely proportional to each other, right? Because more the access provided to you, you are bound to click on random links and get infected. Okay, and that is where the safest mode comes into play and prevents you from being attacked. Got it? Okay, so I'll close this and now we'll look at how we can prevent ourselves from such attacks. Okay, so we basically have two methods, but on the basis of these two methods, now we have a third one as well, which is hybrid analysis. Okay, so we've got static, dynamic, and hybrid. Static is where we won't run that binary file or that executable, where we'll try to find out the common indicators of compromise. Okay, we'll try taking its hash and we'll go to a website which is like, I'm just taking an example, like we can go to virus total, and here we can upload the hash and find out if any other researcher also found something similar which had this hash. And if it was something similar and it was infected, then it means that something that we are working on is also infected. Okay, so that is how you find out common indicators of compromise without doing much. Okay, without doing much, you are trying to just analyze if this file has been compromised with ransomware by statically analyzing it. You are not going to run that file. You're just going to examine it with a few tools and a few techniques, and that is how you'll be able to find out. Okay. The second one is dynamic analysis. Okay, where you'll try to do what? You'll try to run it. Okay, but not run it in any environment. You'll try to run it in a sandbox. Okay, and you'll try to debug it. You'll try to give it different inputs so that you can find out how it reacts on the basis of different inputs. Okay, and then when you talk about hybrid analysis makes use of the first two methods, and in addition to these methods, it will also apply AI or ML techniques for automation. Okay, because after one certain point, we'll get exhausted. How? Because we'll be applying manual techniques. So that is where AI and ML will come into play, and it will tell us if the ransomware is, if the file that we are analyzing is benign or malicious in nature. Okay. Now, this was something about ransomware. Okay. And as you know, there are different types of malware attacks. Ransomware is just one of them. Okay. So basically, there is no such field as ransomware analysis itself. Okay. There is a broad domain called malware analysis, which itself is a subdomain of cybersecurity. Okay. So I got this list of skills required for malware analysis from cybersecurityguide.org. Okay, that's a US based website where you can look at different cybersecurity job roles and what are the skills required for those job roles. Okay, so this is what they have listed. Okay, they have listed some tools in the first line, which are disassemblers and debuggers, which are used for static and dynamic analysis. Okay, and then you would also have to be proficient in maybe one language. Okay, you would have to be proficient in one language because most of the malware is written in either C, C++, or a new language that is out there called Golang. Okay, but majority of malware is written in C or C++. And as you know, majority of malware, be it anything, virus or a ransom or a Trojan, is geared towards which operating system? Can you tell me about which operating? Can you tell me about the operating system towards which malware is created, or for which malware is created? Windows, right? So you would have to know the very basics of how Windows APIs work, and obviously the OS internals, so that you can find out which processes are there inside Windows. Okay. Uh, how can you find out which process was launched first, or how it basically works? Okay. And then, because if you are working with a disassembler, then you won't be able to find out which kind of a data structure is it is, or which kind of a file format it is. So you must be able to work with that as well. Okay. And then the path to malware analysis is basically a two-way path. Let me tell you how. So there are two ways through which you can become a malware analyst. Okay. So let's say if you are in a network domain or in a network security domain where you have been dealing with different protocols, different infrastructure configurations, and firewall configurations. Okay. Then it means that you know about the network side of malware analysis. Okay. Then for you, the path will be to master assembly and maybe one language, C or C++, and then maybe a debugger of your choice and a disassembler of your choice. And then you can become a malware analyst. And then there is a other path as well. Okay. If you're a developer, then you are assumed to be proficient in any one of the programming languages. Okay. Even if you're proficient in one, then the only difference will be in the syntax, right? Because the semantics remain the same. And you would have to master assembly at one certain level, and then you would have to understand how the networks work. Okay. So there are two different paths through which you can become a malware analyst. Okay. So that is why, just give me a second. That is why for malware analysis, a combination of programming as well as networks is required. Okay. And then for the later parts, if you want to automate the process, then you should be proficient in a scripting language. Okay. And towards the end, if you have to document each and everything that you have done, then you should be able to write technical reports. And technical reports is not just required for malware analysis, it's required for almost all the job domains right now. Am I clear? So I believe that you are proficient in networks and firewalls. That is why something that you would have to figure out is to find out how you can learn more and more about a programming language, maybe a procedural oriented programming language like C, and how can you understand more about Windows API and Windows OS internals. Okay. So this was basically something that I had in mind for malware analysis. Initially, we started out with ransomware, but for any kind of malware, whether it's ransomware or it's a virus, it's a worm or a Trojan, you would have to start with malware analysis. Okay, I have some examples for you lined up as well. Like right now, we'll take an example and we'll go to Kali Linux. Okay, now I'm using Kali Linux. It's up to you, whichever operating system you are comfortable with, you can work with it without, any problems. Okay. Usually the operating system which is recommended for malware analysis. Okay. The Linux based operating system distributions which are recommended for malware analysis is Remnux. Okay, so Remnux is a clean install of Linux, and over that installation, you will find a lot of tools just for malware analysis. But if you're working with something like Kali, but then you would have abundance of other tools as well. Okay. Now in Kali Linux, you just have one section for reverse engineering where you get to work with tools like Ghidra and other disassemblers. But what mainly Kali is about is the different attacking tools, right? But if you go with Remnux, I'll copy out the link and send this in the chat box as well. You can go through this after this session, and if you want, you can install it and you can work with it. Okay. Now, in Kali, what do you have already? Okay, to work with different binaries, or if you want to get started with malware analysis. So I used a website called CrackMe's. Okay, it's a website called crackme's.one. And what this website offers you is a bunch of binaries written in different languages: .NET, C, C++, assembler. And next to these languages, you will also find the platforms that they have been designed for. Okay, Windows, Linux, and then there are some binaries for mobile operating systems as well. Okay, so you work with these binaries, you try to reverse engineer them. Okay, you try to find out what is inside these binaries using static analysis techniques and dynamic analysis techniques, and you find out that hidden piece of text or hidden piece of code, and then you would have to enter that hidden piece of code in the solution section, and that is how you get to know that you solved it perfectly. Now if we talk about other domains of cybersecurity, like the offensive side of cybersecurity, there are a variety of platforms. And I'm pretty sure you would have heard of this website called Try Hack Me or Hack the Box, right? And if you find out that most of the people in cybersecurity are interested in the offensive side, and now in a few years, we're going to find out that these fields will be saturated. Okay. And that is what I want to tell you, that there are other fields as well in cybersecurity which are high paying. I know the amount of effort required to break into these fields is more than pen testing, but eventually the fruit is also more. Okay. So when you go to such fields, you're going to get paid. Okay. The pays in the defensive side of cybersecurity is high. Okay. Now, network security is one of them. Network security is under defensive side of cybersecurity. You've got SOC environments where you work with SIEMs. You've got malware analysis. You've got incident response. You've got digital forensics. So there are a lot of blue teaming jobs out there as well. Okay. Finding out the platforms required for understanding these terms and the concepts are lesser than what you have in offensive cybersecurity. But then let me show you this website, crackme's.one. You also go through this website whenever you have time. You start with the binaries which are the easiest. Okay. So you go to crackme's, latest crackme's, or you go to search and you use the difficulty level from 1 to 1. Okay. And then you try to solve some of them. You don't have to worry about not getting it right in the first go. Obviously, it takes some time. Okay. So let's take an example uh, regarding how we can solve these binaries. So I got all these binaries from this website itself. So it's a complete series of binaries. Now I will take any one binary here and I will make use of two different tools. Okay. One tool will come under static analysis. The other one will come under dynamic analysis. Okay. So if I have to proceed with dynamic analysis, then let me just tell you that these binaries are benign. They are not malicious. So you can use uh, dynamic analysis tools. But if you are not certain, right, if you're not certain if binary is malicious or benign, then you would have to do what? You would have to cut all ties between your virtual machine and your host operating system and disconnect your virtual machine from the network. Is that clear? I hope you get the point. Why am I telling you to disconnect the machine from the network and cut all ties from the host OS? Okay, because it can easily infect your machine. So we'll take a simple tool here, which is GDB. Okay, I'll give you some overview of GDB as well. So I'll talk about GDB. GDB stands for GNU Debugger. Okay, so GNU is basically a project that takes care of all the open source tools. Okay, and these tools are actually great because number one, they are free and they can easily compete with the commercialized tools. So if you want to work with a debugger in Windows, you would have to go with WinDBG. Okay, in Linux, you don't have to worry about that. You've got a free debugger, which is GNU Debugger, which helps you do what? It helps you open up a binary and debug it. So you can give different inputs and then you can easily find out how a binary reacts on the basis of those inputs. Okay. Now, I'm not going to teach you GDB completely today, but I'm just going to give you an overview how GDB works. Okay, so I'll just write command delete and command Q. So I'll open GDB and crack me maybe 4. Okay. As soon as I open it, this is what I get. Okay. Now, the GDB that I am using is a little different from the one that comes from the APT repository in Linux. Okay. Why? Because I have added an extension over here. And how does this extension help me? This extension is basically written in Linux. Okay. And GDB itself is a vast tool. And once you start working with it, you're going to face a lot of issues because of how it is designed. And obviously it's a free tool, so obviously you would need to go through its documentation in order to understand it. So I downloaded a very simple extension called GEF. Okay, which stands for GDB enhanced features. I downloaded this extension and now my GDB works wonderful, in a wonderful manner. Why? Because now I can easily understand that inside a binary, which registers are there, where is the stack, where is the set of instructions. Okay, so I'll also share this with you. And don't worry about it because we'll soon hold another workshop just on reverse engineering so that you can get started in reverse engineering and malware analysis. So I have GEF here and I try to open a binary file. Okay, so I wrote GDB space crack me 4. What will this do? It will help me dynamically analyze this binary. Okay, so what I will do now, I will write info functions. Now, why am I doing this? Because every binary is an executable, right? How did it come? It came from a piece of source code, right? And since it's a binary, it means that it made use of all the compiler techniques, assembler, linker, right? So what I'm more interested in is finding out which functions are there inside the source code. So as soon as I write info functions, I will get to see the different functions. Okay, the different functions through which this binary was created. Okay, what is a function? It's a it's basically consisting the code, right? It's basically comprising the code, right? So if I want to check a function here, and because every function or every program that you have written so far consists of a main function. So what I'll do now is I'll write b space star space this location because this function was at this location. So as soon as I do this and I write run, what will it do? It will run from init till this point and then it will break. And it will, how will it help me? Now I can go inside this main function and look at the different registers. I can look at the stack and I can look at the set of instructions. Okay, so as soon as I do run, this is what I get. And now I'm able to see the different registers. I'm able to see the stack and I'm able to see the code. Okay, but then the problem with this code is that it is written in which language, Mohammed? It's written in assembly, right? And it's not a very easy language to understand. That is why you have one more type of tool. Okay, and that tool is basically known as a disassembler. And what does that tool do? I'll show you. So on my terminal, I'll go to a tool called Gidra. Okay, so Gidra is a tool created by the United States National Security Agency for reverse engineering, and it's completely free to use. Okay, I'll share this link with you as well on the chat box. And even if you don't want to install it, just go through it. Okay, just try to see how it works. They have a documentation lined up for you. They even have a installation guide through which you can easily work with this tool. Okay, so I'll write cancel. Let's see what we can open. I'll cancel everything. I'll use the same. Okay, no need to worry because it uploaded or it loaded some other binary. Okay, so it basically loaded the ls command, right? So you worked with the Linux, right? The Linux operating system. So every command that you write on Linux in itself is a binary. Why? Because if you go to your GUI and if you go to the Linux file system, you're going to see that if you go to bin directory, you're going to find all the commands that you write on your terminal.
Hi, you are watching the recording from one of our live session. Hit like, share, and subscribe for more future updates.
Okay. Any command that you have worked with on Linux is going to be present here. Is that clear? Okay. So after the session, you can look for these commands by yourself. Okay. Whether it's pwd or ls or cat, these are all part of bin directory, and bin is short for binary. Okay. So ls also counts as a binary, and no harm in understanding how it works. Okay. So this is a disassembler. Now, what is different about a disassembler? Number one, it's a static analysis tool. Okay. And what it does is, let me show you. Let me grab my pen here. Okay. This is known as the program tree, where you can see different sections of the assembly language code. And this right here, where my arrow is the assembly language code. I'll write ALC. This is the symbol tree where you can find different functions and look at their mapping. Now, this mapping is in a high level language. Okay. Most of the times it's in C. Now, how does it help us out? Initially, in your beginning phase of your malware analysis journey, you won't be able to figure out each and every line of code in assembly. That is why for every function, you will also get what? You will also get a C code. Okay, so that is how disassemblers can help you in finding out how these binaries are working, which function calls are they making, okay, and other stuff as well. So let me just come back here. And yeah, so basically, I hope you understand how these tools work. Okay, so it was just a general overview. Okay, don't worry. We'll have a workshop soon where we will discuss the basics of reverse engineering, basics of these tools as well. Okay, so this is all about reverse engineering and malware analysis, the intro to reverse engineering and malware analysis that I had in mind for today's session. Thank you. Thanks a lot.